Titans back on the practice field on Monday, and things got heated. We'll explain why a fight broke out between Cam Ward and Jeffery Simmons at the end of Titans practice. Plus, how did Cam Ward fare overall? O-line versus D-line, wide receivers and DBs. We got notes from Monday's practice for you. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo, back for our first taped podcast since last week after we had a very successful, I would say, live stream on Friday night. Thanks to everyone who joined that stream. Justin, how's it going?
Doing well. As you said, Titans back on the practice field Monday. Things got heated between Cam Ward and Jeffery Simmons, but that's not all that happened. We got some really good notes. Of course, we'll start with Cam Ward, but we'll go to O-line versus D-line, injury updates on multiple players. We had a couple DBs make some big plays, and I think maybe some just general conversation on these players and maybe their 53-man roster chances as they head into the final week of Titans practice. They are 8 days away. Next Tuesday, 3 p.m., is the deadline to cut down to 53. So we're really down to the nitty-gritty here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and I will be back to do our final roster projection a week from today, one day ahead of those cut downs. Titans obviously are in the last official week, I think, of training camp. I'm not sure when it stops being called training camp and just starts being called practice. We had this conversation briefly last week, but I seem to remember like training camp back in the day when teams would go off and stay in a hotel and like be together, that this might have been the week that they would come back from that situation and like go back to living in their homes and hit the practice field like normal, but can't confirm that for sure because I don't honestly remember exactly. But I do think, Justin, as we get into this, something about the 10-day road trip the Titans just took, because they completed that obviously on Friday. After Friday's game, they flew back to Nashville. They actually were in the facility on Saturday for meetings and to go over film. They had Sunday off and then back on the field on Monday. But that 10-day trip, I think there's something really special about it because it is like, in some ways, a miniature version of the training camp formula that teams used to do when they would have to go stay in a hotel. And I think the fact that not everyone is doing that anymore, obviously there are some teams like the Cowboys who go to Oxnard, or, you know, certain teams like the Bills are showing on Hard Knocks are doing it, you know, away from their team facility. But most teams nowadays aren't doing that thing that really brings a group of people together where you're staying on the road, away from home, away from your families. And I really think that this experience could pay off for the Titans. We've talked a little bit about it, but we haven't really gone into it. So I wanted to bring that up here as we get into things. Now that that road trip is concluded, we probably won't see any benefits from it right away, but I think just having a more connected team, every championship team talks about this the same way. Like, that the guys in the locker room are super bonded and connected and playing for each other. And I think that Brian Callahan, whether or not he becomes a good head coach, whether or not this season becomes a success or a failure, I think this was a really good move by Brian Callahan to attempt to steer this team back on course.
Yeah, I'll say this as well. Like, if you watched, there was like a post-game victory speech that Brian Callahan gave, one that you would normally see in the regular season, but they posted that one on Titan social media after Friday's preseason win. And he focused a lot on being on a 10-day road trip, if you will, and coming away with that victory in that preseason game. As much as we know preseason wins are meaningless, but he focused on that, talking about, hey, we were on the road together for an extended period of time. We can play a football game, and we pulled it out. Right. So I think there is something to be said. That's the stuff you're trying to build on, right? You grow your bond in the offseason, in the summer. If you can go on the road extended periods, come out with wins, I do think that could bring out a togetherness, amongst the group.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about the fact that, like, for example, last Tuesday's practice, the first joint practice in Atlanta, was sloppy and people were trying to blame the fatigue because of this road trip and they haven't been home for so long. Like, then we also need to acknowledge the fact that even if it's backups against backups and it doesn't matter, and the Falcons quarterback that was playing late in the game, Emory Jones, gets knocked out of the game and Easton Stick has to come back into the game, and it's like, it doesn't really matter who the players on the field were at the end of that game. But the fact that the Titans came together as a team and pulled out a win, even in a meaningless preseason game, like, it's not meaningless to those guys who are fighting for their roster spot, who are fighting for a chance to make an NFL team, whether it's in Tennessee or somewhere else. Like, it's not meaningless to them that they overcame this element of fatigue or whatever you want to call it, being on the road, and beat a team that had just been in their homes, practicing at their home facility, sleeping in their own beds, and playing in their home stadium. Again, it's backups versus backups, so it doesn't really matter, but I do think there's something to be said for that.
And it got better as the week went on. I want to put a note in that Wednesday's practice was better than Tuesday's, right? So that's how you measure progress. You saw it got better on Wednesday, and then you came out with the win on Friday. So certainly, it sounds like all parties involved were very pleased with how they battled through and sort of overcame all the challenges that the road trip was really designed, to create, because that's exactly what Brian Callahan wanted to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into practice for Monday here. We'll start with Cam Ward. By all accounts, it was a fairly competitive back and forth practice. The offense had their moments. The defense had theirs as well. He hit Tyler Lockett early in the first play of 7-on-7, and Lockett was, getting stretched out with extra work from the training staff and had a sleeve on his leg. But Teron Davenport said he looked explosive when he caught the ball crossing over the middle on that first 7-on-7 play. He did try to hit him again up the seam later, and I think it just a little out of the reach of Lockett. Said it maybe hit his hands, but he couldn't haul it in. Another one of those plays like we saw with the Van Jefferson catch. It hits them in the hands deep down the field, but can't quite bring it in. I think this is, a rookie quarterback and veteran receiver still trying to get on the same page. Lockett hasn't been a super high level participant in practice. He's been out there a lot in training camp, but he missed a lot of the spring stuff. So I think this is just, any of the connection issues or chemistry issues between Cam Ward and any of his receivers, I personally am sort of going to write off right now because it's August 18th. If we're still seeing chemistry issues in week 1, 2, week 5, week 6, I'll start getting more concerned about it. But right now it's kind of like, who cares, right?
Yeah, I just think, him and Tyler Lockett on that rep specifically where they didn't connect. Veteran receiver and rookie quarterback still getting on the same page. You summed it up. He hasn't been a participant at every practice Tyler Lockett has, so they're going to continue working out those kinks. Remember, they connected on a third down in the first preseason game that moved the chains in the red zone. That was a key pickup, and then they punch it in for a touchdown. I think just 2 plays later, Tony Pollard scores. A couple other notable plays for Cam Ward from this practice. He hit Bryce Oliver in traffic. It was reported as a great catch across the middle with a couple defenders around him. Broken record on Bryce Oliver, right? Locked to make this team. Continues to show up for Cam Ward on offense for every quarterback that he practices with. And we know about the value that he brings on special teams as well. Should we get... I'm going to get into the fight, if you don't mind. So I think that's the next bullet point here for Cam Ward. So some background, and we kind of put this information together in chronological order, if you will. Offense versus defense, a red zone drill. Sounds like the defense started out with a couple of wins against the offense. Now, I'm going to paint a picture here for you. Cam Ward's a competitor, probably not appreciating that they're not able to get the ball into the end zone on those first couple reps. Well, finally they break through, and it's on the ground. It's Julius Chestnut with a rushing touchdown. On that play, J.C. Latham has a great block on Jeffery Simmons to help create that lane for Chestnut to get in the end zone. Of course, Latham lets Jeffery Simmons know about it after that rep. Jeffery Simmons is a competitor, probably doesn't love that one, right? So on the very next play, second straight win for the offense, Cam Ward hits Calvin Ridley for a touchdown. Sounded like a corner route in the back near the pylon of the end zone. As Cam Ward's getting into the zone to celebrate with his teammates, Jeffery Simmons happens to be in his walk path, if you will. He gives Jeffery Simmons a fun little tap on the back, on the shoulder, hits him with the celly, as you know. Simmons takes exception to it. He's running hot from the previous play, still running hot from the touchdown he gives up. He shoves Cam Ward. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of this. Extended elbows or not, what kind of shove was it? But either way, anytime you shove the quarterback, as you know, the offense is up in arms like you've done the worst thing ever. So a whole scum ensues. I think I should have narrated this into a novel. A whole scum ensues. Offense versus defense. Cam Ward in the middle of it. Jeffery Simmons of the middle of it. What else is new? They're both competitors.
Yeah, and shout out to Teron Davenport for the detailed play-by-play there. Easton Freeze also had a very good summation of it. Paul Kaharski and Terry McCormick also reporting on it. But that I don't know how to feel about this, honestly. Number one, I love the fire. Obviously, I love Cam Ward's attitude and shit talking, and JC Latham shit talking, and Jeffery Simmons shit talking. They're all shit talkers, which is great. Do we get a little alarmed that Jeffery Simmons is shoving Cam Ward after a play when we know how important and valuable Cam Ward is to the hopes of this entire franchise? Maybe a little, but at the end of the day, I'm not making a big deal out of it. It is funny that Paul Kaharski noted that Jeffery Simmons was essentially escorted into the Titans locker room after this. They didn't let him go speak to media, reporters on the field who are talking to players after practice. They're like, no, Jeff, you get your ass inside. We don't need you doing that, and we definitely don't need you talking to the media about it right afterward when you're still a little hot about everything that happened at practice today. It's kind of like something that I would say it's maybe a bad look, nationally, if this gets picked up. We're recording this right after the reports of practice ending come out, so we're not sure how the national reaction is going to be to this, if there is one at all. Nobody talks about Cam Ward anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter. But I feel like this could be seen as a bad look, but ultimately, I am sort of taking this as it's a competitive practice with competitive players who want to win every rep they're on the field. If anything, to me, this is a good sign of how much this team wants to continue getting better. And I'm not going to overreact to the star defensive tackle and the best player on the defense shoving the face of the franchise after a play has ended. Again, not a great look, but ultimately kind of a nothing burger.
I'm with you. They're both competitors. It's training camp. Tempers run hot. It is hilarious that they escorted him essentially off the field and didn't let him talk. I'm with you. They know he's got a bit of a temper. He runs hot. Probably would have said something that they wish he wouldn't if they let him talk, and that's why they didn't. Moving on, I think O-line versus D-line drill is probably the second most notable part of practice every day. That's why we're going to follow up Cam Ward discussion with it. Pretty consistent that the O-line has been winning these battles at practice, and that continued here on Monday, August 18th. Cause for concern, I'm going to say yes, to be honest with you, because as we know, these drills are supposed to be skewed for the D-line to win. It seems like they almost never win the day at Titans practice. Couple reps here and there, which we'll cover, but they never really win the day, and that's on par with my expectations. I mean, what are you shrugging? My point is, this is not a good defensive line. We don't think it's good. It's not a good pass rush. So when they're not winning drills that is skewed for them to win, it only sort of confirms that our concerns are legitimate.
Well, you said it's concerning, and I'm sitting here I guess the way I interpret that is this is a new problem that we're learning about that I'm worried about. To me, concerning, not concerning, whatever. We know that the front four of this defensive line, particularly the edge position, is not good, and it won't be good. And I continue to believe that at some point between now and September 7th, when the Titans kick off in Denver, that they will add a veteran edge rusher here. Do I think that player is going to make a huge level of difference? Probably not, especially coming in this late into training camp. A Jadeveon Clowney, a Preston Smith, a Zadarius Smith, even a DeMarcus Walker. I just don't expect that anyone coming in is going to have a massive impact because, I don't know, they're not there's no, obviously, this is stupid to say, there's no Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson out there.
Guys.
I don't think
they picked up a Cameron Wake, right?
Yeah. And he had 2 sacks, I think, in a game, and then tore his Achilles or something crazy like that and was out for the year.
He had 3 sacks in week 1, didn't he? I think
something like that. But I think they could beef up this room by adding somebody in free agency. I'm not talking about a waiver claim, somebody who gets cut off another team. I'm talking about one of the free agents that are still out there.
Agreed.
I kind of just keep expecting that they will add someone eventually, but that these veterans don't want to do any part of training camp, so they're just waiting to sign somewhere. And I also still tend to think that of the 90 guys in camp right now, only 48 of them are going to be on the Titans roster, and the rest will be signings and waiver claims. I also think there's a chance the Titans could trade some late or conditional day 3 picks to beef up depth, kind of like the year that John Robinson traded for Dennis Kelly or something like that. I don't know if it'll be a tackle necessarily, but
he also traded for Dennis Daly and 4 safeties once. So
those were bad ones. But someone in at the edge position, cornerback position, I could see them making a move at one of those spots. But I don't think. I guess while we're here, Justin, I didn't mean to talk about this right now, but while we're here, can I just get this out of the way. The Titans are not going to trade for Trey Hendrickson. They're not going to trade for Terry McLaurin, and they're not going to trade for Brian Robinson. And frankly, you shouldn't really want them to. If they traded for Trey Hendrickson, it would be exciting for a season or two until he's an old man by NFL age standards, and the Titans are still sort of completing their rebuild. It would be exciting for this year, but it doesn't make sense for the long term. And the other two guys don't make sense for the long term at all either. I mean, Terry McLaurin's going to be 30 in September. Brian Robinson's a younger guy, but he's not like particularly great. So anyway, they're not going to trade significant capital for one of these guys that's sitting out there on the market. They might trade a late pick to beef up the depth, but that's the most I would expect there. But back on topic here. The edge position's not going to be good this year, and we just kind of have to accept that. But with that said, you had more notes from the O-line, D-line, including some on rookie Femi Oladejo.
Yeah, so as we said, O-line won the day. Peter Skoronski was one of the standouts. No surprise there. He's their best lineman, in my opinion. Jackson Slater was apparently buzzing. Had a couple of good reps, starting to look the part more and more. Beat UDFA D-tackle Cam Horsley on one of those reps that was particularly impressive. Cam Horsley, of course, fighting for that final roster spot on the D-line, which got a little thinner, by the way, because they waived Philip Bleedy, the UDFA. They did add a guy named TJ Smith, who's kind of been a journeyman over the last 3-4 years. I don't even know why you make this move at this point, to be totally blunt, because I just let Bleedy finish out this week. I don't really get that. And I mean, look, maybe they don't like his efforts. There's always something there. We don't know, right? But just seems like a kind of weird time to make that move. TJ Smith is not going to make the 53-man roster, or the 48 one, as you said, because there's going to be a bunch of waiver claims. But Femi Oladejo, as you mentioned, went 2 for 3, according to various reports on the reps. Lost to J.C. Latham, no surprise there. But he did beat Jalen Duncan with a long arm stab move. Paul Kaharski noted that probably caught, or I think it was Tehran actually, caught Duncan off guard with that move. You'll love to see that. He also had a coverage sack later in the practice. So pretty good showing for Femi Oladejo on Monday.
And that long arm move is the one that he used to get pressure on Cedric Gray's sack in Friday's preseason game, that when we had Drew Beatty on the pod on the live stream, he pointed that out, that the long arm has been, Femi's best move. He just hasn't gone to it as much as maybe he should or needs to. And maybe we're starting to see him realize, and the coaching staff tell him that, look, you got a move that works. You need to refine your bag and add more moves to your arsenal, but you do have one move that you are decently good enough with. Use it. And maybe, he's starting to perfect that move because he's getting pressure with it. And then on the coverage sack, I wanted to mention, how many times have I compared what Femi Oladejo might be able to do for this defense to what Harold Landry has done for this defense before he was let go this offseason? A lot of his sacks were coverage cleanup sacks where he's just the guy with the biggest motor who never quits on the play. And I feel like Femi has some of that energy to him. So I do think, if somebody's going to be getting the coverage sacks on this defense, Femi is prime candidate number 1 to be the guy doing that cleanup duty.
No doubt he is. And honestly, I don't want to get into this whole conversation, but sometimes in arsenal of moves, people overrate it a little bit. Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, they often win with 1 or 2 moves. You're really good at 1 or 2 moves. That's good enough. Because you can beat NFL offensive tackles with consistency if you've got a move.
Yeah, I think you basically need one move, and then you need a counter off of that one move. Once you've dominated with a move and the other team is ready for it, the tackle you're matched up with is prepared to stop your one move, you counter off that move, and then you can still get pressure. And then when they're expecting the counter, you go back to your move. You don't need to be good at every pass rush. You don't need 7 moves in the bag. It's great if you can do that, but if you can dominate with 2 moves, then that's plenty. So hopefully Femi continues to develop his arsenal. But for now, I think you're okay with where he's at. I don't think Femi's going to be a 10-sack guy this year or be a massively high-level contributor, but it'd sure be great if he was.
I mean, is he a 5-sack guy? Is he a 6-sack guy? I think they would take 6, for example, would be probably a pleasant surprise. Couple other notable reps, O-line, D-line there. Desmond Evans, Paul Kaharski noted, uses his size and speed well. And Ali Gay beat Andrew Rupsich. Came with speed off the edge, but countered back inside. I put those 2 reps together side by side because it feels like they're in a 3-man competition with Jalen Harrell for the 5th and final edge rushing spot. Now, that's assuming they don't add someone either in free agency or through a waiver claim, because it feels like that's a prime spot for them to do so, right? But if they decide to go in-house at edge, which would surprise me, it's Ali Gay, It's Jalen Harrell, who returned to practice, by the way, after missing the last couple of ones with an injury. And it's Desmond Evans, the three of those guys battling for that spot.
Yeah, and I think on that note, like they're not just battling for a spot on the roster because, like you said, they could add a veteran or a waiver claim there, but they're also battling just to stay in Nashville because the Titans are going to want a practice squad or two edge rusher to try and keep developing. So that's another place that, like, even if they don't make the team, that doesn't mean their time in Tennessee is over.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, because one guy bumps everyone down the pecking order, but maybe you still get a practice squad spot and someone else doesn't, right? So there's certainly a domino effect there. Because we talked about Jackson Slater a little bit, Femi Oladejo, Cam Horsley, and also Desmond Evans, I'm going to keep the theme going with some of the rookies, if you will. Marcus Harris, back-end corner, continues to stack days is what's being the word out of training camp on him. I'll say this. I think there's an underrated chance, because it's not the expectation, but maybe an underrated chance that he leaps over Darrell Baker Jr. on the depth chart. Paul Kaharski noted that it seems to be trending down for Darrell Baker Jr. at camp this year, and that's kind of in line with what we've put together. Not a whole lot of promising stuff coming out on Darrell Baker Jr. out of camp this year. Maybe Harris is in contention to replace him. He did drop a Cam Ward interception today. Darrell Baker Jr. did. So in the right place at the right time, but couldn't haul it. And maybe he's a surprise cut candidate if they make a waiver claim. Who the heck knows? I think something always surprises you. I always try to predict what's going to surprise us. It's hard to do because if you're predicting something, you don't necessarily expect it to be a surprise. But how do you find the middle ground there? Well, I think there's something there with Darrell Baker Jr. Go ahead.
And I think just to button that up, like the Titans had no hesitancy throwing Jarvis Brownlee Jr. out on the field for significant snaps in week 1 of last season, a 5th-round rookie, despite L'Jarius Sneed being healthy at the time last year. I think they will probably take a similar approach with this year's rookies. Marcus Harris obviously drafted a round later than Jarvis Brownlee Jr. was, but it's not like Jarvis Brownlee Jr. was a high pick by any means. I don't think they would have hesitation throwing Harris out there as a 6th-round rookie as a starter if Sneed can't play in week 1. And based on where we're at right now, I think it would be shocking for L'Jarius Sneed to be on the field week 1 because it takes a few weeks to get back into football shape, and he hasn't practiced in a year.
And he's still on the PUP list. So I'm going to get into the injuries in a second, but the last note I had on a rookie was we saw Gunnar Helm make a great one-handed grab there. The Titans tweeted, I believe it was, one clip to come out of practice as we record this. Now, look, not going to spend a whole lot of time on Gunnar Helm. We talked a lot about him on Friday. Phenomenal touchdown catch to go climb the ladder. Great quote from Cam Ward calling him a dog afterwards. When in doubt, vertical it out, I believe is what he said. Then you see those sticky hands pop up at Monday's practice with the one-hand grab. Regarding injuries, because you got into it quickly there, no T'Vondre Sweat, had his tonsils removed recently. I'm not concerned yet that he's not there, but I'd like to see him get back in the mix soon. No Kevin Winston as they continue to kind of monitor the knee and hamstring tightness that he's been experiencing. Jalen Harrell returned, as I said, after missing a couple of practices in a row. Sebastian Joseph Day also back after not playing on Friday. I thought that was more of a maintenance thing, obviously very minor. He's back on Monday. Sneed still on the PUP list, as you like to call it, the PUP, as I like to call it. Yeah, I'm with you. Lloyd Cushenberry comes off the PUP before he does with an Achilles, and Sneed is still on there with a knee cleanup. Cush did 9-on-7 for the first time on Monday, continuing to trend in the right direction. But I'm kind of with you because we don't necessarily, the expectation, I think generally, and we've spoken to some sources, some reporters, yada, yada, we don't necessarily expect Cush to play week 1. Yada, yada, yeah, I didn't even see that coming. I deserve the ding. We don't expect Cush to play in week 1, right? But if he's doing 9-on-7 already and he came off the PUP, why do we expect Sneed to play in week 1? I guess maybe we're at a point where we shouldn't. And that's really, I'm not going to hide my frustration. It's freaking frustrating for me. And I don't Cush is back with an Achilles and he's 300 pounds. The Achilles is freaking brutal for a 300-pounder. He's back doing 9-on-7. Sneed's still on the PUP. I guess it's going to be Marcus Harris, Darrell Baker Jr., or whoever. Maybe a waiver claim. Maybe a guy they're still going to go out and. It'd be so nice if Asante Samuel Jr. was healthy. I can't believe that guy's still out there. It must be. How bad is his body, by the way, that the Colts are signing the ghost of Xavier Howard,
yeah,
or whoever it was they signed before Asante Samuel Jr. So anyway, but at a point, pretty frustrated with L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, I think I'm expecting Lloyd Cushenberry back by week 1 at this point. I think if you just
Oh,
kind of
wow.
trace the trajectory that he's been on, the fact that he's back at 9-on-7s this week, that puts him on track to be back in full team period contact drills next week, which gives him another week to get his body back into shape before you're doing the week 1 practice leading into Denver. So he's got, I think, plenty of time to continue this ramp up trajectory that he's on. L'Jarius Sneed, on the other hand, will need to go through the same kind of ramp up trajectory, and you're just reaching a point where you don't have time to get him all the way back into playing shape by week 1. And then the question becomes, how much of the season does he miss? Does he start on the PUP list and miss 4 or 6 games or whatever? It's 6, right? Or is it 4 if you start on the PUP list? However many games. There's a chance that like they don't get him back till midseason at this point. Like maybe we're overreacting, but I don't think they're like, I think L'Jarius Sneed at this point, you cannot count on him, because even if he does come back early in the season, is his knee going to hold up to play significant snaps down the stretch? I think you're just reaching a point where you don't have time to get him back into football shape for week 1. And then if that's the case, you can't count on him to be healthy this year. So I agree, you're going to need somebody to step in and be a starter, whether it's last year's waiver claim, Darrell Baker, this year's draft pick, Marcus Harris, a different waiver claim, a free agent. Somebody's going to have to step up. But while we're on the subject of DBs here, those are all the injuries I think that are worth talking about. We have some notable DB wins in this practice. Jarvis Brownlee Jr. broke up a Cam Ward deep route to, guess who? Van Jefferson, still getting deep shots from Cam Ward. Okay, Brian, we'll see how that goes. Amani Hooker had a PBU covering David Martin Robinson. You know, you expect your studs to be making plays in practice and make things difficult for Cam Ward. Seems like we're getting some of that, even though we don't expect necessarily this defense to be great this year. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., another pass breakup on a fade route to Alec Ayamanor. Looks like Ward and Ayamanor still working on that chemistry. I mean, it's the first practice since Friday when they were a little off, so it's not shocking that that's the case, but nice to see Jarvis Brownlee Jr. getting his hands on passes again. And finally, the last one that was noted in, I think it was Teron Davenport's notes that we got these DB wins from, was Roger McCreary breaking up a pass intended for Chimere Dike, also from Cam Ward. So a lot of the names that you would hope to be making plays in coverage, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Amani Hooker, Roger McCreary, are doing so. And I think that as much as we want Cam Ward to go 100% completion in practices because all our hopes are riding on the rookie, it's also nice to see a defense that we don't think is going to be great making plays in coverage on the ball.
I'll say this, that's exactly why I took it as a huge positive, right? Like, I'm concerned about this secondary. We've been concerned about it considering that L'Jarius Sneed is still out. We've talked a lot about the depth at corner. So Amani Hooker making a play on a tight end. We love his ability to cover tight ends, right? We've talked about that a lot throughout his time here. Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is such a dog, man. Breaking up 2 passes, no surprise at all. Oh, one final injury note. I think that we're probably winding down this episode, but I didn't really see it noted as it should have been by a Titans reporter. But buried there in Teron Davenport's notes said that Mike Brown had a pass breakup on a Brandon Allen pass to Tony Pollard, and Quandre Diggs caught the deflection. I don't remember hearing that Quandre Diggs practiced for the first time yet. Like, I don't remember hearing that last week. So. And he didn't play on Friday against the Falcons, and he wasn't at joint practice either. So it sounds like to me that Quandre Diggs practiced for the first time on Monday. That's good and positive to see because, he's coming back from a season-ending foot injury. Like Lloyd Cushenberry, like L'Jarius Sneed, a bit of a ramp-up period involved. He's obviously ahead of both of those guys because he's practicing here. So really good to see. But I talked about Gunnar Helm earlier with that one-handed grab. Sorry for the odd maybe transition. But in that same period, Brandon Allen hit Gunnar Helm for a touchdown pass over Mike Brown. So, Gunnar Helm, by all accounts, another good showing. But that Diggs thing was particularly interesting to me.
Yeah, if we missed that for some reason and you saw it, let us know in the comments below if this is indeed the first time Quandre Diggs has practiced since his return to the Titans, since his injury last year. And I think that does it for practice notes. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Again, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and as I just said a moment ago, drop a comment below. Things got heated today, Justin, but I think progress was made on the practice field. Titans will be practicing again on Tuesday and on Wednesday. You and I are trying to get a guest for tomorrow's show, so tune in tomorrow to find out if we did, because if we did, he'll be on the show. And then we'll also be back to recap Wednesday's practice. That's the plan. Maybe we'll do the same schedule as last week. Thursday, we could preview the preseason outing, the final preseason outing, talk about, the final chance for guys to make their case of why they deserve to be on this roster. And then we will not be live for Friday night's preseason week 3 recap. We're going to do that one on Saturday. It's our last real weekend, the last 2 weekends coming up before we're working every Sunday. So bear with us on that one. We like doing the live streams. We did a couple little trial runs here. It's preseason for us too, knocking off the rust. And we like where we're at. So we'll be back with a live week 1 recap. This week's preseason week 3 recap will be coming to you guys on Saturday. So that does it for this one. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thanks again to Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the channel. I didn't let you maybe say any last thoughts you had, Justin. If you don't have any, you can sign us off, but I'll turn it over to you for the last word of this episode.
No, that does it. But we've got a loaded week, it sounds like, right? We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's practice, back Wednesday for the Wednesday practice, back on Thursday to do a preseason preview, back Saturday AM to recap that Friday night preseason finale, and then probably won't come to you Sunday, but Monday we'll have our final 53-man roster projection. And then I think Tuesday we'll probably do something again as we get the 53-man roster out. I'll be working pretty hard trying to get my fingertips on some of that news Tuesday morning and afternoon. So we've got a ton of episodes. Oh, and we'll have a Cam Ward breakdown this week from Drew Beatty, the second film breakdown since we brought Drew on here as a contributor. That's coming to you real soon, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. So bear with Drew on that. But a ton of content coming your way pretty much every single day this week.
Yeah, I agree. And Justin, I'm going to talk to you about an idea off air here, so stay tuned to the channel for whether or not that comes to fruition. And the best way to stay tuned to the channel, one more time, I'll say it, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit that bell, hit that little bell button, because that gives you a notification every time we post a new video or go live. So make sure you are following us closely. Until next time, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.